click record, and then we go to Skype, and we call Paul. Uh-oh.
All right.
You're on video. What is happening?
Fuck that.
What did you do?
I don't know. So I was typing a message to my wife when the Skype window stole the focus, and I answered before I normally hit record and do so. So it was this was a very hot answer. Hold on.
Yeah, it came in hot.
Give me 5 seconds here. Hold on.
Okay. I appreciated the insight into what you were doing there, though. That was pretty cool.
It just that work I have to do because of that thing I can't talk about because of lawyers and stuff. So.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh man! Yeah. Like there's more. There's more.
Yeah, now we have homework. It's gross.
Okay. See, I say no more. It's fine. It's fine. One day you're going to get to talk about that, and that's going to be a good episode.
Yeah, it's not going to be anytime soon. Whew.
Oh, really? Is it going to go on for a while?
I don't know. Like, I don't have a lot of experience with lawyers, but the experience I do have is everything moves slower than you think it's going to move. So, but that's okay. How you doing, Drew?
I had the day off. I felt pretty good.
I took this whole week off. So.
Oh,
yeah.
Really? What's going on?
Oh, I have vacation I need to use, and
that's where I'm at too.
I had already had this week scheduled off because this was supposed to be one of my concert trips.
Oh.
So and I just kept it. So instead of going to Chicago, I organized my office and chilled and played video games and I did a lot of that myself today, except I didn't organize my office. But what I did do is I went to the dentist and I saw my financial advisor, slept in a little bit, felt good. Just felt good to not be on a computer all day. Yeah.
That was my main purpose for taking some time off. Oh, what was that?
Oh, I'm turning off my fan. See, I wasn't ready. See, the whole thing, this whole thing caught me off guard.
But it's 9:00, Paul.
I know, but I usually have a hot second before, when you start dialing, I make sure everything's good. I hit record and then I hit answer, right? And this whole, it just threw me off guard. The whole podcast is ruined.
I know. Yeah, we're canceling the podcast.
Oh.
Okay.
Oh.
You need a minute?
Nope.
I can wait.
I'm good. Let's do this. I am ready to go. You have my full and undivided attention.
Okay. All right. You sure?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Big news. Mm-hmm. I got my dingus. Finally got my dingus.
Yay!
Yeah. Yay indeed.
So you got your RG350M. For those listeners keeping track at home. What do you think?
Yeah, it is an absolute delight.
Good.
It's an absolute delight. It's astoundingly good. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
I have a list of things that I sort of want to touch on in regards to sort of my review of this thing now that I got hands on it. By the way, did you do silver or what did you do?
I did the space gray, so the blackish silvery color.
Yeah, I went silver, and I'm not disappointed. It's got a really nice finish. It's metal, right?
Yeah.
So it's got some heft. Now, I'll say that I was concerned because when the package did arrive at my house, the box was completely mangled.
Oh, no.
And I thought maybe that had something to do with why it took so long to get to me.
They had to run it through the chipper a few times before they delivered it.
Yeah. No, everything was fine. Even the box that the dingus came in, not the packing box, was sort of damaged.
Oh.
But it was in there pretty good, and everything's fine. It's not dented, the screen's not cracked, the buttons are all where they're supposed to be, and it's really good. I love the controls; they're very tactile. It's kind of a joy to hold. I would say that I don't know if it's because my hands are of a certain size or what, but I notice that I get a little bit of fatigue when I'm holding it for too long.
Okay.
I don't know. That's more of a me problem, I think. not having fingernails because I bite them, it's really hard to get the SD cards in and out of it.
Especially at the beginning when you're doing it constantly. Yeah.
Oh my god. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let me talk about my micro SD card adventure. Okay, so here was like my first. I don't know if I like this kind of moment. I am lousy with. I have just so many micro SD cards in my house. To sort of put that in perspective, I'm looking at them. I have them neatly arranged on my desk right now. I took them out of my desk drawer. I have a total of nine micro SD cards, and they're all 64 gig.
Okay.
They are all Micro Center branded micro SD card. I couldn't tell you what sort of speed they are, but my first adventure. So we talked about this when you did your kind of capsule review of this thing, but I just want to revisit it. Like, the way this thing works is the OS and the quote-unquote firmware of the device comes on one memory card, and then there's an expansion memory card slot where you can load your illegal games on, right? So mine came with the firmware micro SD card, and it came with a bunch of games that just probably broke so many laws.
Oh, all of them. Yeah.
All of the laws, right?
Yeah.
So the first thing I wanted to do is I wanted to make sure that I was running the most recent firmware version. Turns out that my model has shipped with what appears to be the latest firmware version, so I didn't have to upgrade.
That's not always the case, though. It's pretty much a crapshoot of what version you get. It seems to be to me, yeah.
Yeah, it seems to be. It sort of depends where you order from.
Yeah.
I got mine literally right off the boat, so I think they're putting the new versions on there.
Yeah, I had the new version too. Yeah.
And I think like the biggest feature of the newest version of the firmware is the HDMI port works. I assume, right?
I
the
think
version
so.
I have the version I have, it says it does it, but without support for a controller, like, I'm not going to hook this thing up to a TV and then not stare at this screen. No. And yeah, it's just, that's not going to work for me, dog. So I have the most recent version. However, I did want to take the time to make a backup of the OS firmware SD card that comes with this thing, and it comes with, I believe, I think it came with a 16 gig card. I have it off to the side here. Let me double check.
I think it was like 16 in the quote unquote internal, like the firmware SD card, and 32 for the one chuck full of ROMs.
Yep, yeah. You are correct. So what I did is I sort of went into my back cellar, and once upon a time I had built a Raspberry Pi Kubernetes cluster, so I basically robbed memory cards out of that. My plan was, here was what I was going to do. I was going to take two of those 64 gig SD cards. I was going to turn one into my new OS sort of card and one into my illegal games card. And this is where the adventure takes a little bit of a turn. So
I think I know where this goes.
So look, I'll just cut right to the chase. Partition management of non-Microsoft file systems on Windows is awful. It's just awful.
It's not good. And did you notice the particular quirk about this particular SD card?
Well, okay, so I gotta kind of wind back here for a second. Right. So I have in my possession, I have two memory card readers. Now, I don't know how you deal with this, but like I have both of them right here and right in front of me. Yep. One is, sorry, I'm closing my drawer. One is a standard USB Type A connector that has a Type Mini, I don't know, one of the USB form factors on the other end that then plugs into an all-in-one mini card reader. So I've got SD card, micro SD, mini SD, compact flash, like every conceivable type of memory card could go in this thing. It's a nice little unit. I had previously used this thing a lot when I was like transferring stuff to my 3D printer, and it has seen some miles, but it still works perfectly fine. So what happened was I went back and I grabbed one of those 64 gig SD cards out of my Raspberry Pi. Now, that was formatted for Linux, right? Because Raspbian OS runs Linux, so that memory card was sort of already like there. Now, my particular memory card reader, when I plug this thing in, whether or not there is a card present in the slot, they show up as drives in the OS.
Yes, I have one that does. I have one that has a micro and regular SD card slot, and in Windows it shows as empty on both of them. Yeah,
right.
It's like you have to format this. I'm like, nothing.
Whoa, that's so we're not even there yet. Okay, so like, right. I would take one of these Linux OS things, and I would sort of jam it into the memory card thing, because what I wanted to do is I wanted to completely wipe it, so it wasn't going to be funky partitions, or because I knew this was going to happen, right? Not my first rodeo with this type of thing. Now, what was interesting was I would throw in this memory card, and Windows would basically recognize that I had two drives plugged in. Like, one was the sort of the fat partition that is like the boot partition of the OS, and then there's this other partition that, you know, isn't FAT32 or NTFS, that it's just like, So like the first challenge is, okay, so you get the memory card in there, you get rid of the pop-up that says you have to format this. Then I fired up a utility that they recommended for basically making an image of the memory card.
Yes.
And that's sort of when I hit my first conundrum, because I was like, well, hold on a second. This computer thinks that I've got two drives in here. Does that mean that one partition is on one drive and one's on the other? Is it just going to get the whole drive? I wasn't really sure. So I took a crapshoot, and I just said, give me, it was like drive F or drive G. So like I just chose F because it came before G and it's my last name. So like I said copy, and it just took forever to copy. So I made the image, and then I formatted that card, and then I made the image of the Dingus's OS card. No problems whatsoever. However, these Micro Center SD cards, literally every single one I tried, I kept getting write failures in multiple applications when I was trying to write to them. It just wouldn't work. So by chance, I have in some of my other Raspberry Pis that aren't part of that Kubernetes cluster, I've got some higher quality memory cards. Like I think I had a Kingston laying around, and then I had like a nice like SanDisk. I also have one for like my Nintendo Switch, but that was going to be kind of like a last resort. And so I fired that one in there, and not only did it write like 10 times faster, but it also completed successfully. So that was like the first thing. Now that worked, and I was able to boot the device. But one thing I noticed is I had a couple instances where, like, when I was working with the Micro Center cards, where I was having trouble writing the image to the new memory card, and like this thing won't boot if it can't find an OS.
Yes, that is correct.
Like you hold the button, and the light that usually lights up to tell you that it's on sort of goes like dim green, and it's just like not going to work.
It makes the light equivalent of that noise. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's just lit up. You can tell that it's lit up, but only just. And it's like
it's disappointed in you. Yeah,
it is very disappointed in you. All right, so that was issue number one. Now issue number two, I have a card that is bigger than the 16 gigs. And you talked about this.
Oh, briefly.
So then it was like, okay, so I used a 32 gig card, but the image is only 16 gigs. So you have to like manually resize a partition. Well, I can tell you right now, that's just not going to happen in Windows, right? There are utilities to do that, but like we're talking like enterprise software grade stuff that I just don't want to install on my computer. But we'll circle back to how I got around that in a minute.
Okay.
But yeah, that was an adventure, which again, you sort of went through that. So I'll just kind of ask you before I talk about what I did. What did you do?
So what I wanted to do was I wanted to use gparted.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, I had it in my head. Well, I mean, I don't know. Does gparted even run on a Mac? I had it in my head that I need to run this gparted in a Linux virtual machine, which I had one handy. The issue I had was I could not get the SD card to mount in the virtual machine, period.
Right.
I just could not get it to work. I had no problem with the same SD card reader in Windows, but something about Linux, it just would not work. So I was hosed.
Well, Paul, you have, as friend of the show Nick Dunn will tell you, if you haven't written your own driver, you're not really using Linux.
Yeah. I was like, no, I'm done. So I used that. What? I used the piece of software recommended on that Wagner's Tech Talk website, and man, I felt like that software.
You felt like you needed a shower, right?
I did. Yes.
Yeah, it's bad. Okay, so I went a very similar route as you did, but I was doing all of this work on my Windows computer, and I have Hyper-V installed. And now, I have been using computers a long time, and I think that I'm pretty good at computers. However, I have yet, in all of my, I don't know, call it 32 years of computing, if you factor in like when I could first like start banging on a keyboard and it makes sense, I have never successfully resized a Linux partition from the command line. And I defy anybody to tell me how that works. Like, you have to know like where one head of like the block device ends, and then you have to extend it manually. It's entirely possible.
It's not. I don't think it is.
Yeah, I want to believe, and I'm not giving up, because in the past when I have been working with Linux VMs like for not this, and I've run out of disk space, I literally like, well, that's VM bankruptcy, and I literally will create a new VM because it's impossible. It's impossible unless you have a desktop version of Linux running where you can use the gparted tool to expand the drive. I don't know how you do this. If you're listening and you're a Linux expert and you could tell me in 10 words or less the steps involved, yes, 10 words or less, we will send you a prize. All right, you get a prize.
Yeah, I get gparted, but I could just not get that SD card to go through the VM and be mounted. It just yeah. So
well, you did it on a Mac VM, right?
Yes, yeah, through VMware Fusion.
Yeah, so what I did is on Hyper-V here, I spun up a Ubuntu 18 desktop image. I actually booted the live CD, and I was able to successfully get my USB to pass through to it, and it seemed to. I was able to use gparted right on there, so that was relatively painless to do. Okay. So just a heads up there. I mean, I'm willing to bet that Apple probably doesn't. I'm sure that it probably needs like kernel access, and Apple's like, no, because as we'll talk about a little bit later, it turns out Apple likes to control things. Yeah, but that's foreshadowing. So anyway, so I successfully resized that partition. So then, I tore down that VM, and then I was like, all right, now it's time to back up the original pirated ROM thing that they sent me, and it's time to put my legitimate games on this thing. And herein lied my second challenge. Apparently, this device only recognizes FAT32 file systems for SD card.
Yes.
Yeah. So the card to help illustrate what we're talking about here. So like when you look at I guess you could call it the bottom side of the device when you're holding it in your hands, there's two memory card slots. There's one for the OS and the firmware, and then there's one for the games and whatever else you want to put on this thing, movies, whatever, music. That thing has to be formatted FAT32. Now, if you're using a memory card of any like decent size and you try to format it FAT32 in Windows, you're going to have a bad time because you can't. Like, you either are going to format it NTFS or exFAT. Like, above a certain capacity, Windows just barfs. And like, you can get close, okay? If you go into disk part on your PC, you can clean the partitions off of that target SD card. You can attempt to format it FAT32. It'll get to 99%, and then it'll be like, nope, can't do it anymore. Like, it's not possible to do. So like, I fretted over this pretty mightily. And in the end, what I ended up doing is literally just walking up my stairs to my Mac and formatting the memory card there, because it doesn't apparently have a problem formatting it in FAT32 format. Literally used my Mac to format a DOS format or Windows FAT32 file table partition set. So I had to get it into there. Okay, so then the third problem I had was I obviously have a lot of classic games like Sega, Nintendo, Super Nintendo, things that I've had for years, right? Like I've just had those. The one thing that I haven't collected before have been PlayStation games.
Okay.
And I was really, really, really interested to see how the PlayStation gaming experience was on this thing. So in my desk drawer, I have 3 PlayStation games that I have kept ever since I had my first PlayStation. We're talking mid-90s. Like, these games have survived college moves. They have survived apartment and house moves. Yeah, they are my ride or die games that I will never get rid of. And, you know, one of my favorite all-time games is Castlevania Symphony of the Night.
Okay.
I love that game. I've owned it on PlayStation. I've owned it on, like, different online services for Sony. I've owned it for Xbox. Like, I just love that game. So in my desk drawer, I have Symphony of the Night. So getting a disc image of that thing wasn't hard, okay?
Yeah.
The utilities that you use to do that spit out a bin and a Q file. Mm-hmm. Now this game is incredibly particular because in addition to the main track of the CD that has the game, it also has a separate track that is all of the audio. In fact, the music of that game is one of my favorite parts, okay? So whenever I was extracting that disc to put on this thing, I was actually left with 3 files. I was left with the Q file, which basically is like an index of here's what this file is, here's where it begins and ends, and then here's the second file that is the music tracks for the game. Because that was a pretty popular thing with not just PlayStation games, but like CD-ROM games in general, because you could have that higher bit rate, better quality sound on the CD as opposed to just putting it on your computer, right?
The game was literally like the first track of the CD, then the music was the others. Yeah.
Right. So this CD, like I said, has 2 tracks. So what I did first as a test is I copied the Q file and the 2 bin files to the Dingus, and it was able to load the game. No problems. And I can't remember if the sound worked or not. I don't think it did. I don't think the sound worked.
Okay.
But whether or not the sound worked, the bigger problem is that whenever you open the menu to launch the game, there were basically 3 Castlevania Symphony of the Nights in the list.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? There was like the Q file, the bin file, and then the second bin file. And I'm like, this isn't going to work for me, dog. I got to figure out what to do here. So then I went down the rabbit hole of, you know, using all of my Google skills to basically say, how do you take a bin and Q file layout and convert it to an ISO? So there's a lot of questionable utilities that will let you do that. None of which I were comfortable installing. Let's just be 100% clear. But I went through several iterations of figuring out how you get that to be converted so that it packs all of the tracks in the right order and basically compresses that into a disk image that I then put on the memory card, and lo and behold, it's one file. Everything works. Like, the music's there. It does work.
Excellent.
Yeah. So let me ask you then. So for your PlayStation games, like, what format did you leave them in?
I just use the bin and Qs. Yeah.
Oh, so you got 2 entries per game then?
Yeah, it doesn't bother me. I've learned that the Q's usually the one at the bottom, and if you launch that one, it's the most reliable. So
okay.
That's the method that I've kind of.
Maybe I didn't launch the Q file.
Yeah, if you launch the bin, I've had issues, especially with like Tony Hawk 4 has like 12 tracks, right? There's like a bunch of bin files, but it like sorts them alphabetically, and so the C's after B, and
you just launched the Q file.
That typically works for me.
Yeah, so I was able to get it installed. Now, all right. So this leads me to a feature of Windows that I don't know if you're aware of or not.
Okay.
And that is the Windows Sandbox. Have you seen this?
No, I have. I don't know what you're even talking about.
All right, so check this out. In the latest build of Windows, you can spin up what they call a sandbox, and it is a extremely lightweight desktop environment that everything runs in isolation in.
Okay.
So, like, let's say you're like, here's a weird-looking exe file. I really want to open this. You can launch your Windows Sandbox. You could infect it with everything you can conceivably want to infect it with. And the minute it can't talk to the guest, or it can't talk to the host operating system. It can talk to the internet, though, I think. I didn't try that, but I did. I think I remember seeing like a web browser and like a network connection in it, because literally it looks like a little mini desktop pops up on your other desktop, and you can just do whatever in there. So literally, there's no image, right? It isn't. I mean, I think it's probably Hyper-V under the covers, but it's not Hyper-V. Like, you literally run the sandbox. It launches like almost instantaneously, which is pretty crazy to me. And it's disposable, right? It's almost like a container. So, like, I drop these questionable utilities inside of it to, like, do this ISO wizardry. And then when I close the sandbox, it's like, I don't need it anymore. Like, it just goes away. So, you need Windows 10 Professional or Enterprise to do it. And you do have to have your virtualization turned on in your BIOS, which I think most people do, unless you built your computer or something, and maybe it doesn't. It does not use a lot of system resources. It works exactly as advertised, and it gave me such incredible peace of mind. I didn't have to build a VM. I literally just copied my file. I went to my desktop where I had downloaded these files originally. Control-C, click on the desktop that's the sandbox. Control-V, ran it, and it works perfectly fine. And like I said, the two environments can't talk to each other. So, like, I can't, like, call back to a program or anything. Like, it's completely temporary, completely isolated. Like, you want to download some Bitcoin miners and, like, just, like, have at it, like, go crazy, right? Just do whatever. And it just goes away whenever you're done.
That sounds really, like, handy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think it's in the latest build. And like I said, it was kind of remarkable. Just how fast and responsive it was. Now, like, am I going to use that to, like, do development in or, like, use as a VM? Probably not. Like, it's literally there when I have, like, a program that I just want to, like, I don't know if I really want to install this. And, like, a lot of the utilities that are advertised on some of the guides for this website explicitly fall into that category. Like, they're garbage applications that I don't want on my computer for any extended period of time.
I can see it being very useful for, like, security researchers and stuff. It's like, let's see what this executable does. Oh, that. Delete the whole sandbox and be done with it. Yeah. That sounds really cool.
Yeah. And it's like, it's a base image built off of your computer. And, like, I'll drop there's this really cool document out in the docs for it where it talks about the architecture of it and sort of how it works. I mean, it's virtualization, but it sort of isn't.
Yeah, that's really cool.
But there's like a separate configuration file that you can use to control, like, if you want to allow audio, if you want to allow printers, like, you know, it's like maybe you only want to use a printer in your sandbox. Like, I get that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, because printers are malware in disguise. Let's be real. So anyway, I thought that was a really cool feature, and it was something that really kind of helped me through my RG350M journey.
Cool.
So, yeah, this thing is really good. It's really good. I haven't really pushed it. I literally just been playing one game. It's a game from my childhood, and I've already got like 10 hours into it. So it's like,
what is it?
It's Final Fantasy II, which is really Final Fantasy IV.
Yeah.
I think I played that game, like, there's an internal clock in the game, and I pretty distinctly remember getting that to go to 9999. Like, I remember
Wow.
I remember playing that game so much. And it was like the first game that, like, really popped my JRPG cherry. Like, I had played like the first Final Fantasy on the NES, and it was like just brutally hard, and it took me a long time to, like, understand how that game works. And, like, I did end up beating Final Fantasy 1, so I was a fan. And then, like, we got a Super Nintendo And that was like the third or fourth game that I think we bought. And I just played the ever-loving shit out of it. I just love it. And like, there's just so much world in there, and it's vibrant, and the combat's fun, the characters are memorable. Like, it's just a really good game. It's a happy childhood game for me. And I'm just playing through it again. And
Awesome.
they've re-released that game in 3D, and it's just not the same. And like, I'm playing through it the way that, you know, whatever, 14 or 15-year-old Drew played through it back in 1994 or whatever it came out. I don't even know. But like, yeah, dude, it's just really taken me back. And like, I just lay on the couch and play that for 4 or 5 hours at a clip. And this device is perfect for that. Now, I have noticed that they have some questionable configurations about like the display of certain games. Have you run into this?
Most of the time, I just like turn off the scaling and anything like that because
that's exactly what I do.
I don't want to be bothered with it. I don't want it's like, yeah, like I've been playing a lot of like Game Boy Advance games, and like they're letterboxed, but like it's fine. I don't need to see the characters stretched out. Like it just.
Yeah, like on the Super Nintendo emulator, like they default to the video smoothing.
Yeah.
They default to like stretching it to the entire width of the screen, and like
I turned all that off. Yep.
I turned all that off too.
Yeah.
And I set that as a global config because I can't think of any games I want to play that as.
Yeah, I did the same thing. But it's nice that the options are there. But I just original resolution. If I'm not using all of my pixels, life will go on. Like, it's honestly because like the first thing, like when I started first playing a game, like with the weird scaling, I found text to be very hard to read.
Yeah,
there was like this can't be right. I can't remember. Like this wasn't what it was like when I was a kid. I could read the text, and I had to go like, oh yeah, turn that scaling off, and then it was much happier.
And it didn't immediately dawn on me what was off. It just looked like something was off, and I thought maybe it was just like an artifact of the display. But then like the OS that you like boot into is like super crisp and clear, and I'm like, something's not right here. And then I found where they set that at.
Yeah.
And I just basically made that a global config. So yeah, all in all, I'm extremely pleased. I appreciate you very much for turning me onto this. Yeah. It's been a great little device.
I'm glad that you enjoy it.
I'm glad that I just finally got it. Like like that was the big thing.
Yeah.
Anything else about the RG350M before we go on?
No.
Okay. So I got to give a quick shout out to friend of the show, Matt Tremaines, who sent me a really nice text message today because he caught our latest episode where you were talking about Ghost of Tsushima.
Yes.
And he basically offered to lend me his PS4 so I could play it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, what a great dude, right?
Yeah.
And I want to take him up on that. I just don't have the time right now. But I just wanted to acknowledge that because like we actually have a listener. So it's like that was the more incredible part to me.
There's like at least 4.
There's at least 4.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's Matt, Nikki, my buddy Andrew lives near Akron. I think that's it. And me, right?
I think our numbers are closer to 60, but
really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Let's see. Let's just look at the last few episodes here.
Yeah, we haven't really checked on our stats for a while.
No. It definitely looks like there definitely is some trailing. But we have some episodes that got downloaded, like some of the older stuff, like for episode 37 back, it's usually around 60. And we have a lot of people, it looks like they're like 2 or 3 weeks behind. So the numbers for each episode slowly grow. Then people gotta keep up. We are very timely.
Yeah, we're moving. We're freaking moving here, folks. You gotta
make
keep up.
the time to listen to the show.
Yeah, right. Or else you're banned. If you don't listen when it launches, you're banned from the podcast. I'm banning you from the podcast.
We're not banning you, but no.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah. So I mean, we've had a pretty. It's a small but loyal base. So.
Well, that's that. I do demand and respect loyalty. All right. Okay, so the next topic we're going to talk about, I only tangentially know about because I wasn't in front of a computer or a TV at all today.
Okay,
so I'm gonna let you. I've talked enough. I'm gonna let you drive here.
So we are recording this on Thursday, August 13th. 9 o'clock. It's currently 9:38 p.m. This is a topic that is moving very quickly. So I want to kind of talk about the whole Apple versus Epic. Oh, now it's even Epic versus Google as well.
Well, did they do the same thing?
Yeah.
Oh. Okay.
Okay. So
right.
so I give a little context here. We're talking about Epic Games. Epic Games has, I mean, let's face it. Right now they have 3 products, right? They have the Epic Game Store, which they're trying to be a competitor to Steam. Good luck there, guys. They have the Unreal video game engine, which, from what I believe, makes a majority of their money. And they have Fortnite, which is a very popular battle royale game. Heck, my son still plays it every once in a while. It's still very, very popular, even though, like, you know, the Uber nerds like to make fun of it. Oh, you play Fortnite. Like, yeah, everybody plays Fortnite. It's very popular. Well, Fortnite runs on anything it can, right? It's PC, console, and mobile, right? So they're on the iOS App Store, and they are on the Google Play App Store for Android. And excuse me if I get all my Android terminology wrong. I'm not an Android person. So I'm going to mostly focus on the Apple stuff because I think it's really interesting, because Apple's also been in a lot of hot water. Like, I think Spotify suing them. They just had to testify before Congress. And basically Apple's policy is, if you're selling a digital good, whether that's gems or a book, like an ebook or you know, some sort of in-game currency, if what you're buying is digital, it has to be an in-app purchase through the App Store, and Apple has to get a 30% cut, right? If you're selling a physical good or service, so if you're buying, like, you know, a toaster from Amazon, or you're ordering an Uber, you can offer your own payment system and capture that payment externally and leave Apple out of it. So what happened today? It's just, it's Epic. Like, Epic's lawyers must have been just like ready to go today. Like, they had all full of gumption, ready to go. So Epic kind of announced today that, like, hey, we're lowering the price in Fortnite of all of our V-Bucks, right? That's, V-Bucks is like their virtual currency you can use to buy emotes and skins and, you know, whatever you buy in Fortnite. It's their fun bucks. But what they did is, so they had a big marketing push. Like, everybody got an email this morning. It's like, hey, you know, if you buy your V-Bucks from us, they're now 20% cheaper. And what they did is they introduced, like, a server-side flag that changed the Fortnite game on iOS, that when you buy V-Bucks, you had 2 options. One, you could buy it from Apple and do the in-app purchase and pay the normal price, or you could buy your V-Bucks through Epic. It basically opened up a web browser, and you could buy the V-Bucks from them, and they were 20% off, right? So, like, what idiot's going to go, well, I'm going to pay $2 more for my V-Bucks, right? I'm going to go through the Epic. But the thing is, that is in direct violation of Apple's terms and service, like, direct violation. So, not immediately, but I'm sure there was phone calls and negotiations where people were on the phone. But at the end, Apple pulled Fortnite from the App Store. So if you go to your iOS device and you search for Fortnite, you won't see it. It's like it's not there. If you have the app installed, it still runs, but it can't get any updates. Well, as soon as they did that, like within minutes, they filed a lawsuit.
So they I feel like they were ready for it. They knew what was going to happen.
Oh, yes, they had a lawsuit ready, and the lawsuit's very interesting because they don't want damages, right? They're not looking for money. I don't want Apple. Epic doesn't want Apple to give them a pile of cash. They want Apple to open up. That's what they're suing for. And Epic wants to have their own app store. That's their, like, this is what we want. We want to be able to compete with Apple on iOS, have our own app store, do our own payments, whatever, whatever we want. And then this is why they had been planning this for a long time. Fortnite released a commercial on YouTube, which it's a parody of Apple's 1984 commercial when they're basically like fighting against Microsoft, right? You remember that commercial?
Yeah, as you were talking, like, I went to a gaming site to kind of get an update here, and that is so cringy. It's not even funny.
Oh,
it's incredibly cringy.
I mean, Epic must feel they're big enough to take this on and go like, yep, like, we're going to do this today. We know we're going to remove from the App Store, and we're going to sue them, and they must think they're going to win. Now, so I just find this whole situation, like, fascinating. Like, I'm sitting at home, I'm like eating my popcorn, just going like, ooh, what are they going to do now? What are they going to do now? Just recently, like right before the show started, Google removed them from the Google Play Store, basically saying like, hey, like, Google basically said, like, you can do side loading and whatever you want, but if you're in the Play Store, you follow the Play Store rules, and one of those is you use our payment services. So they got pulled from the Google Play Store, and then Epic immediately sued them as well. The lawsuits are a little bit different, but the gist of it's basically the same, saying that, like, not allowing, the way you're forcing it is you're, not allowing competition. You're basically abusing your monopoly on the platform and screwing us over. So I just kind of want to get your opinion on this. So, like, on the Apple side, it's not. So I'm going to use like Comixology as an example because it's something I use a lot, and it's owned by Amazon. So, like, comics, even digital comics, are very, very, like, it's not a high margin business, right? Like, there's not a lot of money to be made. You have to make it up on volume. So they really can't afford to pay Apple's 30% tax on digital goods, or they'd have to basically increase the price 30% and just pass that right on to us, and then sales would go down and people would complain, yada, yada, yada. So you can't buy comics on the iOS Comixology app. And, like, Apple's rules are, like, if you're not using Apple's in-app purchase mechanism, you can't even hint that there's another way to buy these, right? You can't link out to a web view. You can't even put text explaining, like, hey, if you want to buy comics, please visit Comixology.com and buy your comics there. You can't even hint at it. You basically just have, like, the app and you kind of have to have this understanding of, like, well, you can read the stuff here, but if you want to buy them, you have to go behind and go into the alley. Like, Apple's, like, extremely, like, strict about this kinds of thing. And I personally think it makes the apps worse. It's a worse experience for the customers, like, to be able to, like, same thing with the Amazon Kindle app, right? You can read books there, but you can't buy books. There's no catalog, right? You have to know to go to Amazon.com to buy your stuff. And I think at the end of the day, it makes it a worse experience. And I think Apple should just cave and allow, like, if you want to provide your own payment processing inside your own app, or at least be able to, like, have a link saying, hey, click this link and open a web browser, and then you can buy your stuff there. I don't know. What do you think, Drew?
Well, again, and I was just sort of like listening to you and sort of like tangentially reading about the issue, right? I think that there's always been like a regardless of what we're talking about here, and I don't mean to say this to pick on Epic or anything, but like in-app purchases in general have always seemed really scummy to me.
Okay.
Regardless of what platform you use them on, right? And we're always hearing stories about how people spend too much money on them or whatever, right? So on the one hand, if you're forcing the developers to go through Apple's payment system to buy V-Bucks, you're probably making it easier for people to quote unquote accidentally buy a bunch of V-Bucks.
Okay.
Right? It probably makes it easier and a more seamless experience for the user if all of that stuff is just integrated, right? And at the same time, as crappy as Apple's policy is, it gives you a little bit of a, I don't know if control is the right word, but visibility into what people are charging for things. Because I seem to remember there was a story, I think it was like shortly after the App Store went live for the very, very first time. Somebody put an app on the App Store for like $10,000.
Yeah. I Am Rich app. Yeah.
Yeah. And like people bought it. Right. And it's like people will just click on whatever because they don't think money's real. And that's like a really dangerous attitude to have. But whatever. So on the one hand, like, Apple can see that and shut that down. And like if you start offering these payment services, sort of third-party web browser pop-up, like you sort of lose that control a little bit, right? Because now you're taking the purchasing power away from, or not the purchasing power, but the purchasing pipeline away from Apple, and they don't really have the visibility into what people were doing with phones. Now, the counter argument here is that I could either open a web browser manually on my phone, go to the Epic Store, buy my V-Bucks, and be done with it. Just like I could, like in your example, go to Amazon, or I could go to my computer and buy my V-Bucks, right?
Yep.
At the end of the day, I mean, I don't think Epic has too much of a leg to stand on here. It's Apple's policies.
I disagree.
Really?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah. I think at some point, whether it's Epic or not, I think either Google or Apple are going to lose this fight.
But what does losing the fight look like?
That's the thing, is I don't know.
Does losing the fight mean every developer can now code their own payment processors, which I might trust Epic to do that, but it's kind of like rolling your own crypto, right? Like I don't trust everybody else.
No, that's exactly it. Like I think the walled garden of having to submit your apps and stuff to Apple in the first place. I mean, I don't have a problem with that at all. Like, I don't need third-party app stores. I don't need, side-loaded apps. I don't have a problem with that at all. But like, I think at a minimum, if Apple allowed developers to basically explain the situation and saying like, hey, we don't offer in-app purchases through the app, but if you visit our website, you can do that. You can do that stuff there. I think that would take a lot of the heat off of Apple, just in general.
And to be clear, like you can't even put in your app like click here to open a web browser to go there.
You can't even tell the user, hey, because I don't want to pay Apple 30%. You can't get in-app purchases here. You can't even suggest or hint that.
Well, okay. Well, that's okay. Yeah. Hold on. I think there's probably a right and a wrong way to go about doing that.
Yeah.
I think putting snark in your app to the extent of, I have to do it this way because Apple said so. Like, okay, that might be the wrong way to do it, but I agree with you. Yeah. I think that if a developer wants to not leverage Apple to do that, they should be allowed to do that. And then at that point, the onus is on the consumer to know, like, oh, this is the website I'm visiting, and I'm going to type in my credit card number willingly here. Like, you're basically having the user take a lot of risk.
Yeah,
right?
Like, or have Epic say, like, hey, if you want to buy V-Bucks, please go to, Fortnite whatever.
Right.
And buy your V-Bucks there. Like,
right.
I think that would be a good kind of.
Well, it's like I'm an Amazon Prime member, right?
Yep.
And I don't think, can you renew your Prime membership in the Amazon app?
I don't know if you can. right? It's very like, I don't think you can actually, because you can't buy like Kindle books from the app. You have to go to like Amazon.com.
Right.
And it's real kind of like sketchy, because there's even questions of per the rules, right? Like if you're like, well, certain interpretation of Apple's rules is, say like you're a college and you have an app and you offer like online classes through the app, because that is a digital service. Yeah, Apple gets 30% of that. And a lot of places were like, that doesn't make a lot of sense because you really can't buy it from there. Like, it's just this. I think Apple needs to get rid of the distinction of physical goods and services. You can do whatever the hell you want. Digital goods and services, you have to play by our rules. And I get like they're trying to protect the consumer. But like there's some businesses that want to own that relationship, right? They want to own the billing relationship. They want to know exactly who's paid and who's not and how much, and, you know, save on that credit card processing fees and you know, really like, A, it's about reducing costs, but B, it's also being a little bit closer to the customer. Like, you know, I've listened to other podcasts and stuff, and like, the one example I'll give is like, Marco Arment, the developer of the Overcast app, and it has a premium subscription that you can pay, and you get a few extra features, and you feel good because you're supporting an indie developer. The example he gave was like, he doesn't know that Paul Baylor paid his bill, right? He doesn't know how much I paid. He doesn't know what subscription tier I bought. He just knows that Apple says that I'm paying, and then he gets a pile of money for me and all the other subscribers, right? If I have a problem with my billing, I don't call Marco, I call Apple, right? And he's okay with that because he doesn't want to deal with that relationship. He doesn't want to deal with billing. He doesn't want to do anything like that. But you look at like what happened to the Hey email client, right? They do want to own that relationship. They do want to be able to know exactly how much like I am paying and when I pay, and, you know, my individual account. And they don't have a problem with if I have a billing problem or need a refund. They have the infrastructure to deal with that, you know, to be able to handle that call and that support. But because they're in the App Store, they don't have either. Their option is basically like, don't offer subscriptions, or don't even hint at the fact that you can get a hey.com, you know, email address, or pay Apple 30%. Like that's, but if I was selling like widgets, I could do whatever I wanted. I think they need to, me personally, I think they need to stop making a difference between physical and digital goods. But that's just me.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. I guess I don't really know where I land here. I think that if you're going to force me to choose a side, like, you know, I don't know.
It's tough. On the other
It's
hand,
tricky.
like, yeah, you're right. Apple can monitor all of that. They can, you know, if someone is being scammy, they can immediately refund those, you know, customers and shut things down. Like there is advantages to Apple controlling everything, right? Like they can really focus on that and, you know, make sure people are playing by the rules and they're not doing anything scammy. And you have one person to call if you have billing issues or you need a refund. Right. But on the other hand, like they're not allowing, like, I don't know. And this is why I think they're going to lose, is because they're not allowing competition. And I don't know, especially like in the EU, they're super sensitive to that kind of stuff.
But isn't the competition the Google Play Store? Like, if you don't like our policies, don't use our platform.
Yeah, and that's Apple's argument, and I don't think that necessarily is a really good argument.
Right.
But
I'll be honest with you, right? And like people are gonna, you know, accuse me, and maybe rightfully so, of like fanboyism here, but like that's part of the reason I buy into Apple, right? Like I sort of, and you know, listen, I know that we live in a time where like we have to be really protective of our digital privacy and our digital lives and our digital footprints, but like of all the companies that I sort of allow into my tech digital sphere, I sort of trust Apple the most, right? Because regardless of these draconian policies and, you know, the Orwellian sense of it, if I'm saying that word right, I sort of trust them to maybe look out for my interests more than like a Google does, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I feel like we get better, more responsible apps as a result of it, right? Like you don't have scammy apps, or it's not going to steal your info. Like there's a process that these apps have to adhere to. And like I like the fact that apps are held to a little bit of a standard, right?
Yeah.
Now, you know, is it right that Apple takes a cut of all those payments? Is it right that, you know, you have to adhere to certain guidelines that maybe make this a little more rigid and inflexible? Maybe not. But I mean, I guess I think I sort of fall in the middle of this argument, leaning more towards Apple.
Now, I have one more question. We're running a little long here, so this will be the last question I ask you. So, Microsoft's also been working on xCloud, right, which is their online streaming Azure-powered game service, right? Which, from what I understand, is actually like really good, compared to like Stadia, which was kind of
garbage,
all promises and lies. Apple has basically said no to xCloud on iOS for the reason that they can't review the games individually. I don't know. Do you have an opinion about that? Are you allowed to have an opinion on that?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I work with a lot of people who don't like Apple.
Yeah.
So, you know, and as like the lone member of our team that uses a Mac every day working where I work, I mean, I'm always put on the defensive for those arguments, and trust me, there's plenty of that to go around with this announcement too.
Yeah.
Look, I think personally that maybe that's a little too far.
Yeah.
Right? Because the games are being streamed, right? The app is responsible for receiving a stream of information. To me, it's no different than having Spotify that is a client for streaming content to you. So
and it's not like those games aren't reviewed by a third party. They're given ratings.
Well, but I think it's more than that, because you're going to allow Spotify, right? Apple's not reviewing every single song that Spotify streams to you, right? Yeah,
or every show on Netflix. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So I think that is kind of, I think that argument doesn't hold as much water as maybe the argument they have against with Epic, right?
And I think even with the xCloud stuff, like this, like whether the technology is there today and how good the experience is, like cloud streaming of games, like that's the new hotness, right? Like that's where all the technology, all the money's being spent. That's the cool thing. And I don't know why Apple would want to keep the cool thing off of their platform unless it's just at the root of it is we won our 30%. Like it just feels that it's that kind of decision makes the Apple platform worse. And if I mean, not me, because I'd rather, like lose a toe than use an Android device. But I can see a lot of gamers in the future thinking, well, like my next phone, is it going to be an Android or an Apple device? And going, well, you know what? I can try that whole xCloud thing or Stadia on my Android. On an Android, maybe I should try that.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong, man. Like, at that point, it almost becomes an exclusive thing, like a badge of honor. Like, you want this service, you gotta have Android, right?
Yeah, and like,
I personally, I think that position will probably soften.
Yeah,
I think that Apple may come around on that particular argument.
I mean, if I was Apple, I'd be like figuring out how I can make a partnership with Microsoft to say, hey, if you want the best xCloud experience, play on an iPad, right? Like, be part of it instead of working against it. Like, get behind the marketing and saying like, hey, like you can play anywhere, but hey, the iPad supports the HDR and the ProMotion high refresh screen, and like go out of your way to make it like Apple the best experience for xCloud or something like that. But I'm not a bean counter. Oh.
All right.
Yeah.
Man, we've run the gamut tonight.
We did.
Man. All right, let's wrap this one up. Where can people find us?
As always, you can find us on the internet at doingtheirbest.com. You can reach out to us on Twitter at doingbestpod. And you can find me on Twitter at Paul Baylor. That's Bahler. And where can we find you, Drew?
I'm on Twitter at Pittsburgh, P-A-T-T-F-U-R-G, and on Twitch at P-I-T-T-F-U-R-G as well.
Spectacular.
All right, everybody.
Thanks for listening.